I never thought I'd be standing outside my daughter's home in the rain, my arm in a sling, suitcase at my feet, watching my son-in-law's silhouette through the fogged glass as he refused to open the door. The same home I had signed away my retirement to help them buy. The same home where my name still appeared on the deed as co-owner. But life has a way of revealing people's true colors when you're at your most vulnerable. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning everything changed began ordinarily enough. I was pruning the rose bushes in my small garden when the phone rang. It was my doctor confirming my knee replacement surgery for the following week. At 68, I'd put it off for too long, hobbling around in pain rather than facing the 6-week recovery period. Who wants to admit they're getting older? Margaret. Reynolds? The nurse's cheerful voice echoed through the speakerphone. Dr. Mitchell wants to know if you've arranged for post-operative care. You'll need assistance for at least 4 to 6 weeks. I glanced around my empty house, the one I'd downsized to after helping both my children with their down payments. The silence answered before I could. Of course, I lied. Everything's arranged. After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me had silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun, laugh lines around, kind eyes, and worry etched across her forehead. I'd spent 35 years teaching second graders, raising my own children as a single mother after Richard left, and somehow managing to save enough to help both my daughter Becky and my son Jason buy their first homes. Now I needed help, and I was terrified to ask for it. I called Becky first. She and Daniel lived just 20 minutes away in Oakwood Estates, in the beautiful 2-story I'd contributed $175,000 toward, nearly half my retirement savings. I'd insisted on keeping my name on the deed as co-owner, not from lack of trust, but because my financial advisor suggested it would protect my investment. Mom, how are you? Becky's voice always had that slightly distracted quality, like she was simultaneously typing emails. She was a marketing executive who specialized in crisis management. Ironic, considering how she handled family matters. I'm having my knee surgery next Tuesday, I said, trying to sound casual. The doctor says I'll need some help afterward. I was wondering. Oh, next Tuesday? The clicking of her keyboard stopped. That's right in the middle of the Westridge campaign launch. Daniel and I will be swamped. I understand, I said, though my heart sank. Maybe just for a few days after? I can't really manage stairs right after surgery, and my bedroom here is upstairs. The silence stretched uncomfortably before she responded. Let me talk to Daniel and call you back. We might be able to work something out. I next called Jason, my tech-savvy son who lived an hour away in Portland with his wife Amanda. They had purchased their trendy downtown loft 3 years ago with $150,000 of my help, another chunk of my retirement that I'd never regretted giving. Until now, perhaps. Hey, Mom, Jason answered on the 5th ring. On a client call. Everything okay? I explained again about the surgery, about needing somewhere to recover. Mom, we'd love to help, but our place is tiny. No guest room, remember? Plus, Amanda's starting her new design firm, and we've converted the living room into her studio. There's literally nowhere for you to sleep. I could take the couch, I suggested, hating the pleading in my voice. For 6 weeks after knee surgery? That sounds like torture. Plus, the building doesn't have an elevator. You'd never manage the 3 flights of stairs. Have you asked Becky? Their place is massive. When we hung up, I sat in my garden, watching bees flit between the lavender stalks. I'd never expected my children to repay me for the financial help I'd given them. That wasn't how love worked. But I had expected them to care when I needed them. My phone rang as the garden shadows lengthened. It was Becky. Mom, we figured it out. Daniel has a college friend who's a nurse. She does private home care. We'll pay for her to come to your house 3 times a week after your surgery. Becky, the doctor says I need full-time care initially. I can't climb stairs, can't drive, can't really do much for myself the first couple of weeks. 3 times a week is the best we can do, Mom. We're right in the middle of the biggest campaign of my career, and Daniel's up for partner this year. I closed my eyes, steadying myself. What if I stayed with you? Just for 2 weeks, until I can manage the stairs at home? Another lengthy pause. Let me talk to Daniel again. This time, she called back within minutes. Daniel says it's fine, she said, though something in her voice sounded strained. Just for 2 weeks, right? We'll set up the guest room downstairs. Relief washed over me. Thank you, sweetheart. I promise I won't be any trouble. The day of my surgery arrived with a cool Oregon mist hanging over Riverside. Dorothy, my neighbor and closest friend, drove me to Riverside Memorial Hospital. You sure about this arrangement with Becky and Daniel? Dot asked as we waited in pre-op. You know you could stay with me. My place is small, but it's all on one level. I patted her hand. That's sweet, but Becky and Daniel have that beautiful guest suite on the first floor. And their family. Dot's expression turned skeptical. She'd heard enough stories about my son-in-law over our weekly coffee meetups, but she just squeezed my hand. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. The surgery went well, according to Dr. Mitchell. I woke groggy and in pain, with a heavily bandaged knee and strict instructions not to put weight on my right leg for at least 10 days. Becky came to pick me up the following afternoon, her designer. Sunglasses pushed up on her head, fingers constantly darting to check her phone. Daniel set up the guest room, she said, helping me into her SUV. He had meetings today, so he couldn't come along. That was thoughtful of him, I said, though I'd noticed Daniel hadn't visited me in the hospital either. When we arrived at their house in Oakwood Estates, I marveled again at its beauty, the stone facade, the manicured lawn, the soaring 2-story entryway. I had taught elementary school for 35 years and could never have afforded to live in such a place on my own. Seeing my daughter here made all those years of scrimping and saving worthwhile. Daniel greeted us at the door, all perfect white teeth and crisp button-down shirt. My son-in-law looked every inch the successful attorney on the partner track. Handsome, polished, and perpetually impatient. Margaret, he said with a nod. No hug, no, how are you feeling? Just my name, stated as a fact. Becky, the Westridge. People called again. I left the message on your desk. And just like that, he was gone, retreating to his home office without offering to help me inside. Becky wrestled with my suitcase and the walker while I hobbled through the doorway. The guest suite was lovely, a queen-sized bed with a floral comforter, tasteful landscapes on the walls, and an attached bathroom with a shower seat already installed. I sank onto the bed, exhausted from the short journey from hospital to home. I'll bring you some dinner around 6, Becky said, already backing toward the door. The TV remote is on the nightstand, and I put a bell there if you need anything urgent. We're both working from home this week, but we have a lot of video calls, so if you could try not to make too much noise. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I nodded, suddenly feeling like an intruder rather than a mother. I'll be fine, sweetheart. Don't worry about me. The first few days followed a similar pattern. I'd wake to find a breakfast tray outside my door, usually cold coffee and toast. Becky would check in briefly before disappearing into her home office. Daniel rarely appeared except to microwave his lunch, during which he'd nod at me silently if we happened to cross paths. My grandchildren, Emily and Tyler, were busy with school and activities, only stopping by my room to say quick hellos before racing off again. By the 4th day, I was feeling strong enough to navigate to the kitchen with my walker. I thought perhaps I could make myself useful by preparing dinner for everyone. It would be my way of saying thank you. I found pork chops in the refrigerator and vegetables in the crisper drawer. Working slowly, I seasoned the meat and chopped potatoes, onions, and carrots for roasting. It took me 3 times as long as it normally would, but the familiar routine of cooking brought comfort. I was sliding the roasting pan into the oven when Daniel walked in. He stopped short, staring at me as if I'd broken into his house. "What are you doing?" he asked, his tone clipped. "Making dinner," I said, smiling through my discomfort. I thought it would be nice to contribute something. He glanced at the countertop, where I'd left some vegetable peelings and spices out. "Becky has a very specific way she likes the kitchen. Kept. And we had dinner plans with the Goldsteins tonight, potential clients." I left a note on the family calendar. My face burned with embarrassment. "I didn't see any calendar. I'm sorry." "It's on the refrigerator door," he said, pointing to a color-coded monthly calendar I couldn't possibly have seen while seated in my walker. The one with "Dinner with Goldsteins" written in red. I nodded, feeling about 2 inches tall. "I'll clean everything up." "Don't worry about it." His tone suggested I should absolutely worry about it. "I'll tell Maria to take care of it tomorrow." That night, I ate a pork chop alone in my room while the rest of the family went out. As I chewed the meat that had turned dry from sitting in the turned-off oven for hours, I scrolled through my phone's photos. Pictures of Becky as a child, her gap-toothed smile so open and loving. Photos of the day we'd toured this house. Her eyes wide with excitement as she whispered, "Mom, I could never afford this without you." I remembered how I'd gone to the bank the next day and withdrawn nearly half my retirement to help with the down payment. The bank manager had tried to dissuade me. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is an extremely generous gift. Are you sure you want to deplete your savings this way?" "They're my children," I'd replied simply. What else would I do with it? Now, staring at the guest room walls, I wondered if the bank manager had been right all along. On the 5th morning, I woke to raised voices in the kitchen. I couldn't make out the words, but Becky's tone was pleading while Daniel's was firm and increasingly agitated. I heard my name mentioned several times. The voices stopped when I appeared in the doorway with my walker an hour later. "Good morning," I said cautiously. Becky's smile was strained. "Morning, Mom. How did you sleep?" "Fine, thank you." I looked between them. "Is everything okay?" "Perfect," Daniel said, straightening his tie. "I need to get to the office. Actual office today. Not working from home." After he left, Becky busied herself loading the dishwasher, her movements jerky and tense. "Becky," I said gently, "if my being here is causing problems—" "It's fine, Mom." Her voice was too bright. "Daniel's just stressed about this partner decision. It's coming up in a few weeks and he's been working himself to death." I nodded, not believing her for a second. I was thinking, maybe I could try going home a bit early. Dorothy said she could check in on me. Becky turned, relief written plainly across her face. "Are you sure? Dr. Mitchell said 2 weeks. Minimum." "I'm feeling much stronger," I lied. "And I hate being a burden." "You're not a burden," she insisted, but her expression said otherwise. That afternoon, I called Dorothy to ask if her offer of help was still open. "Of course it is," she said immediately. "What's happened?" "Nothing specific," I said, unwilling to criticize my daughter. "It's just tense here. I think they need their space." "Maggie, that's ridiculous. You gave them the money to buy that McMansion. They've got plenty of space." I sighed. "It's complicated, Dot." "It's not complicated. It's ungrateful is what it is." After we hung up, I lay back on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling. Maybe Dorothy was right. Maybe I had a right to feel hurt. But they were still my children, and I'd given the money freely, with no expectation of repayment. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, raised voices were coming from just outside my door. She's my mother, Daniel. What do you expect me to do? Throw her out? Becky's voice was tear-filled. Of course not, Daniel hissed. But we agreed on 2 weeks. 2 weeks maximum, Becky. It's been 5 days and I can't deal with this for 9 more. She's reorganized the spice rack, for Christ's sake. She's trying to be helpful. It's not helpful. It's invasive. This is our home. It's her home, too. Her name is on the deed, remember? There was a dangerous pause. Don't remind me of that. If I'd known having your mother's name on our house deed meant she'd think she could move in whenever she wanted, I never would have agreed to it. She's not moving in. She's recovering from surgery. Right. And when she goes back home and can't manage the stairs there, then what? She'll be right back here, with that sad look on her face, saying she just needs a little more time. Then, suddenly, we have a permanent house guest. I felt my chest tighten, shame and anger rising in equal measure. Is that what he thought of me? A burden to be managed? An intruder in the home I'd helped provide? Their argument continued, moving further down the hallway until I could no longer make out the words. I lay there, a tear sliding down my temple and into my hair, feeling utterly alone. That night, at dinner, a takeout affair eaten mostly in silence, I made my announcement. I've decided to go back home tomorrow, I said, keeping my tone light. Dorothy will help me with anything I can't manage on my own. Daniel's relief was palpable. If you're sure that's what you want, Margaret, we wouldn't want to rush your recovery. Mom, are you sure? Becky asked, though I could see the same relief in her eyes. It's no trouble having you here. I'm sure, I said firmly. Dorothy's place is all on one level, and she's retired, so she has plenty of time to check on me. Later, as Becky helped me pack, she perched on the edge of the guest bed. Mom, I'm sorry about all this. It's just bad. Timing with work and everything. I understand, I said, and I did. I understood completely now. You have your own life. I shouldn't expect to be a part of it. Her face fell. That's not what I meant. Of course you're part of my life. But we both knew the truth. I was part of her life when it was convenient, when it fit neatly into the schedule on her refrigerator door, when it didn't interfere with Daniel's path to partnership or her marketing campaigns. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my banking app on my phone and stared at my account balance, $32,458. The remainder of my retirement after helping both children with their homes. At my current rate of modest living, it would last maybe 5 more years. And then what? In the darkness of the guest room, a thought began to form, not fully realized yet, but a seed of something like resolve. For decades, I'd put my children first. I'd raised them alone after Richard left me for his secretary, Valerie. I'd worked summer school to afford Becky's dance lessons and Jason's computer camp. I'd downsized my life repeatedly to expand theirs. And now, when I needed them most, I discovered the painful truth. Love didn't work the way I thought it did. At least, not their love for me. Morning arrived with a soft rain pattering against the guest room window. I dressed slowly, my knee throbbing despite the pain medication. As I packed the last of my toiletries, I heard the front door open and close, followed by unfamiliar voices in the foyer. Curious, I made my way slowly down the hallway with my walker. Margaret, Daniel's voice was unusually bright. I'd like you to meet Howard and Elaine Goldstein, potential clients. They're considering having our firm handle their estate planning. I smiled politely at the elegant couple standing in the entryway. They appeared to be in their 70s, both silver-haired and expensively dressed. How lovely to meet you, I said. I'm just on my way out, actually. My daughter has kindly been letting me stay during my recovery from knee surgery. Oh, you poor dear, Elaine said sympathetically. You're leaving already? Surely not back to an empty house? Before I could answer, Daniel jumped in smoothly. Margaret has a wonderful arrangement with her neighbor. They're very close. Still, Howard frowned. Family should take care of family. That's our philosophy, isn't it, Elaine? It's why we're so particular about our estate planning. We want to make sure everything goes to people who share our values. Daniel's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I could almost see his commission slipping away. A small, admittedly petty part of me enjoyed his discomfort. Yes, I'm very fortunate, I said. Becky and Daniel have this beautiful home partly because I contributed to the down payment. My name is even on the deed as co-owner. Elaine beamed. How wonderful! A true family partnership. Absolutely, Daniel agreed, shooting me a warning look. Margaret has been incredibly generous, and we've invited her to stay as long as necessary for her recovery. Yet here I am, leaving after only 5 days, I said, my smile never wavering. Life is full of surprises, isn't it? The Goldsteins exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Daniel's jaw clenched so hard I could see a muscle jumping in his cheek. Well, we should let you get back to your meeting, I said pleasantly. Becky should be here any minute to drive me home. As if on cue, Becky walked through the front door, freezing momentarily at the sight of the small gathering in the foyer. Oh, I didn't realize we had company. Introductions were made again, and I excused myself to finish packing. As I slowly made my way back to the guest room, I heard Howard Goldstein's voice drift down the hallway. Sending your mother-in-law home less than a week after knee surgery? That's not how we were raised, young man. Daniel's reply was too low to hear, but the damage was done. In trying to impress potential clients with his beautiful home and perfect family, my son-in-law had revealed his true character. Back in my room. I sat heavily on the bed, my knee throbbing in time with my heartbeat. The seed of resolve that had begun to form the night before was now taking root, growing stronger with each passing minute. For the first time in decades, I was going to put myself first. I just wasn't quite sure how yet. When Becky came to help with my suitcase, her expression was thunderous. Did you have to mention the deed in front of the Goldsteins? She hissed. Daniel says they practically canceled the meeting on the spot. I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, accomplished daughter, who had somehow become a stranger to me. I only mentioned facts, Becky. If those facts made Daniel uncomfortable, perhaps he should consider why. Her face softened slightly. Mom, it's not that we don't want to help you. It's just complicated right now. Life is always complicated, Rebecca. That's when family is supposed to matter most. The drive to Dorothy's house was silent and strained. When we arrived, my friend was waiting on her front porch, her arms crossed and her expression fierce. She helped me from the car without a word to Becky. Call if you need anything, Mom, Becky said, not quite meeting my eyes. I'll check in tomorrow. As we watched her drive away, Dorothy shook her head. 5 days. They couldn't handle you for 5 lousy days. It's fine, Dot, I said, though we both knew it wasn't. Thank you for taking me in. Don't thank me. That's what real family does, blood relation or not. Inside Dorothy's modest ranch-style home, everything was on one level as promised. She'd prepared the spare bedroom with fresh linens and installed grab bars in the bathroom. On the kitchen table sat a vase of fresh-cut flowers and a stack of get-well cards from our friends at the community center. Everyone's been asking about you, Dorothy said, helping me settle into a recliner. George from the garden center brought those flowers. Said he misses seeing you at the community plots. I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the cozy Afghan Dorothy tucked around my legs. These people, my friends, my community, had shown more concern for my well-being than my own children. Now, Dorothy said, sitting across from me, tell me what you're going to do. About what? About this whole mess. Your ungrateful children, the money, that house with your name on the deed. She leaned forward, You're not just going to let this go, are you, Maggie? I sighed, gazing out her window at the rain-soaked garden. What choice do I have? They're still my children. Being a parent doesn't mean being a doormat. You taught second grade for 35 years. What would you tell one of your students if someone kept taking their crayons without saying thank you? Despite everything, I had to smile. I'd tell them to speak up, to stand up for themselves. Dorothy nodded firmly. Exactly. So when are you going to start taking your own advice, Margaret Reynolds? As I sat there watching raindrops chase each other down Dorothy's window panes, the seed of resolve that had been growing inside me finally blossomed into a plan. Becky and Daniel might have refused to let me live with them after my surgery, but my name was still on their deed. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I remembered what that really meant. Dorothy's spare bedroom became my sanctuary for the next 2 weeks. Each morning, sunlight filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the quilt as I slowly regained my strength. The physical therapist visited 3 times a week, guiding me through exercises that sent sharp pains, shooting through my knee but gradually increased my mobility. You're healing nicely, Dr. Mitchell said during my follow-up appointment. But I'm still concerned about those stairs at your house. You're not ready for them yet. Dorothy, sitting beside me in the examination room, spoke up immediately. She's welcome to stay with me as long as she needs. No stairs, no pressure. The contrast between Dorothy's generosity and my own children's reluctance wasn't lost on me. Becky had called twice. Brief conversations focused mainly on my recovery timeline. Jason had sent flowers but hadn't visited. Neither had mentioned me returning to their homes. I've been thinking, I said to Dorothy as we drove back from the appointment. I need to make some changes. Dorothy glanced at me, eyebrows raised. What kind of changes? I'm not sure yet, but I can't go back to the way things were. Back at Dorothy's house, I settled on her porch swing, my leg carefully elevated. The midday sun warmed my face as I watched neighbors walking dogs and children riding bikes. Ordinary life continuing while mine felt suspended in uncertainty. My phone buzzed with a text message from Becky. How was the doctor? Still on track to go home next week? No. How are you feeling? No, I miss you. Just checking on my exit strategy from their lives. I set the phone aside without answering, my mind drifting to the conversation I'd overheard at Becky and Daniel's house. If I'd known having your mother's name on our house deed meant she'd think she could move in whenever she wanted, I never would have agreed to it. But I hadn't moved in. I'd needed temporary help after surgery, help that any loving family should provide without complaint. Was that so unreasonable? The cruel irony was that I'd given them the money that made their comfortable life possible, and they couldn't spare a guest room for a few weeks in return. That evening, after Dorothy had gone to bed, I made a decision. I opened my laptop and searched for property rights co-owner deed. What I discovered over the next few hours changed everything. As co-owner of Becky and Daniel's house, I had legal rights they probably never considered. I couldn't be excluded from the property without my consent. I was entitled to access. Most importantly, if I wanted to sell my share, they would either have to buy me out, or the entire property would need to be sold. I sat back, stunned by the implications. I'd insisted on being a co-owner as a safety measure, never imagining I'd need to exercise these rights. It had been about protecting my investment, not controlling my children's lives. But now, the knowledge felt like a key turning in a lock, a door opening to possibilities I'd never considered. The next morning, I called an old friend who had retired from teaching the same year I had. Caroline Weber had gone on to get her real estate license as a second career. Maggie, how's the knee? I've been meaning to visit. Caroline's warm voice brought an immediate smile to my face. It's improving, I said. Listen, Caroline, I need some professional advice. Can you meet for coffee? 2 days later, Caroline and I sat at a corner, table in Silver Lining Cafe, steaming mugs between us and real estate documents spread across the table. "So you're a one-third owner," Caroline confirmed, examining the deed. "Your contribution was specifically documented as an ownership stake, not a gift. That's significant." "What exactly does it mean for me?" I asked. Caroline leaned forward, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "It means you have options, Maggie. If you wanted to, you could force a partition action, essentially forcing the sale of the property to divide the proceeds according to ownership shares." "I don't want to force them out of their home," I said quickly. "Of course not. But knowing you could gives you leverage." She sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "There's something else you should know. Property values in Oakwood Estates have nearly doubled since they bought that house." My eyes widened. "Doubled?" Caroline nodded. "Your $175,000 investment would now be worth close to $350,000. If they wanted to buy you out, that's what you'd be entitled to." The number took my breath away. $350,000. Enough to buy a small, single-level home outright. Enough to secure my independence for years to come. "They don't have that kind of money," I murmured. "They could refinance," Caroline suggested, "or they could agree to a payment plan. But Maggie, the important thing is that you understand your position of strength here." As Caroline gathered up the documents, she gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Think about what you want, Maggie, not what's best for everyone else. What do you want?" The question followed me back to Dorothy's house, echoing in my mind as I performed my physical therapy exercises. What did I want? For so long, my wants had been secondary to my children's needs. Even after they were grown, I'd continued prioritizing their happiness over my own security. Now, at 68, with a surgically repaired knee and dwindling savings, I finally had to confront an uncomfortable truth. No one was putting my needs first, including me. That evening, Dorothy and I sat on her back patio, watching fireflies dance among her garden shrubs. I'd shared everything I'd learned from Caroline. "So what are you going to do?" Dorothy asked, refilling our lemonade glasses. "I'm going to talk to them," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I'm going to explain the situation and ask them to buy out my share of the house." Dorothy raised her eyebrows. "And if they refuse?" I took a deep breath. "Then I'll have decisions to make." The next day, I texted both Becky and Jason, asking them to meet me for dinner on Sunday. "Important family discussion," I wrote. "Please make every effort to be there." Becky responded almost immediately. "Is everything okay with your health?" The concern in her message would have been touching if it hadn't been so transparently self-interested. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about what my health might require of her. "My health is fine," I replied. "This is about financial matters." Jason didn't respond until the following day, and only to say he'd try to make it, but might have to join by video call if an important client meeting came up. I bit back my frustration. When had I raised children who placed important client meetings above family? By Sunday, I was a bundle of nerves. Dorothy drove me to Silver Lining Cafe, where I'd reserved a quiet corner table. "Call me when you're done," she said, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Remember, you're not asking for anything you don't deserve." I arrived 15 minutes early, settling myself at the table with a folder of documents Caroline had helped me prepare. My heart pounded as I watched the door, rehearsing what I would say when my children arrived. Becky came first, looking polished in casual weekend attire, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Mom," she said, bending to kiss my cheek. "You look better. How's the knee?" "Improving every day," I said, gesturing for her to sit. "Let's wait for your brother before we get into everything." Jason arrived 10 minutes late, slightly out of breath. "Sorry," he said, sliding into the chair beside his sister. Traffic was terrible coming from Portland. Looking at my children, sitting across from me, both successful, both beneficiaries of my sacrifices, I felt a complicated tangle of emotions: love, disappointment, resolve. "Thank you both for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since my surgery about the future and about my financial security." Their expressions shifted subtly, a slight narrowing of Jason's eyes, a tightening of Becky's smile. "Mom, we're happy to help however we can," Jason said, though his tone suggested otherwise. I nodded, acknowledging his words if not his sincerity. "When I helped each of you buy your homes, I wasn't just being generous. I was investing in my future too." "Of course, Mom," Becky jumped in, "and we're so grateful." I held up a hand, stopping her. "Please let me finish. With Becky and Daniel's house, I'm legally a co-owner. My name is on the deed, representing my 1/3 ownership share. I've recently learned that my investment has appreciated significantly." I slid a document across the table, a property valuation Caroline had prepared. "Based on current market values, my share is now worth approximately $350,000. Both of them leaned forward to examine the paper, their expressions darkening as they absorbed the implications. "What exactly are you saying, Mom?" Jason asked, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm saying that I need to access the equity in that investment. I'm asking Becky and Daniel to buy out my share of the house." The silence that followed was deafening. Becky's face had gone pale, while Jason sat back, arms crossed defensively. "Mom, that's—" Becky struggled to find words. "We can't possibly come up with that kind of money." "You could refinance," I suggested, echoing Caroline's advice. "Or we could work out a payment plan over time." Jason shook his head. "This is crazy. You gave us that money. You said it was to help us get started." "I said it was an investment. In our family's future," I corrected him gently. And it was. But I didn't anticipate being left alone when I needed help after surgery. Becky flushed. "Is that what this is about? Punishing us because Daniel and I couldn't accommodate you for more than a few days?" "This isn't punishment, Rebecca. This is about securing my own future. I have limited savings left. I can't return to my 2-story house because of the stairs. I need to purchase a single-level home, and I need my investment back to do that." "What about the money you gave me for my loft?" Jason demanded. "Are you going to try to get that back too?" I shook my head. That was structured differently. I don't have ownership rights there. But to be fair, I'm only asking for what's legally mine from Becky's house. Jason turned to his sister. "This is ridiculous. She can't force you to sell." "Actually," I said, sliding another document forward, "I can request a partition by sale. It would force the entire property to be sold and the proceeds divided according to ownership shares." "You wouldn't dare," Becky whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't want to," I assured her. "I'm simply explaining my legal rights, so we can find a solution that works for everyone." Jason pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I can't believe you're doing this. After everything you've done for us, now you're threatening to take Becky's house away? Who are you?" His words stung, but I held my ground. "I'm still your mother. I'm still the woman who worked summers to pay for your computer camps. I'm still the person who downsized her life repeatedly to expand yours. But I'm also someone who needs to think about her own security now." "This is insane," Jason muttered, standing up. "I have to go. I can't be part of this conversation." "Jason, wait," I began, but he was already striding toward the door. Becky remained seated, her eyes fixed on the property valuation. "Daniel is going to lose his mind," she said quietly. "I'm sorry about that," I said, and I meant it. "But this isn't about Daniel. It's about what's fair." She looked up at me, tears shimmering in her eyes. Do you have any idea what you're asking? We'd have to take out a second mortgage. Our monthly payments would increase by hundreds of dollars. I understand that, I acknowledged. That's why I'm willing to discuss a payment plan. Maybe a second mortgage with payments directly to me instead of a bank. Becky wiped at her eyes. Why are you doing this now? If you needed money, you could have just asked. Because I shouldn't have to ask, Becky. I shouldn't have to beg my children for what's rightfully mine. My voice caught, and I took a moment to steady myself. When you needed a home, I gave you half my retirement without hesitation. When I needed a place to recover from surgery, you couldn't wait to get rid of me. The harsh truth hung between us like a physical presence. Becky didn't try to deny it. I need to talk to Daniel, she said finally, gathering her purse. This affects him too. Of course, I agreed. Take some time to discuss it, but I need an answer within 2 weeks. After she left, I sat alone at the table, emotionally drained but strangely empowered. For the first time in decades, I had advocated for myself, stated my needs clearly, and stood firm in the face of resistance. It hadn't gone perfectly, but it was a start. Dorothy picked me up 30 minutes later, finding me still sitting at the table staring into a cold cup of tea. Well, she prompted as I eased myself into her car. How did it go? About as well as could be expected, I said wearily. Jason stormed out. Becky needs to talk to Daniel, but I made my case. Dorothy patted my hand. Good for you, Maggie. That took guts. Back at Dorothy's house, I retreated to the spare bedroom, emotionally exhausted. Lying on the bed, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, birthday parties, graduations, family vacations. Had I imagined the closeness we once shared? Or had it always been conditional, dependent on what I could give rather than who I was? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Reynolds, this is Daniel Thompson. We need to talk. About this ridiculous demand you've made. Call me. I set the phone aside without responding. Daniel's reaction was predictable, but I wouldn't be intimidated. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about fairness. The following days passed. Intense silence. Neither Becky nor Jason called, though I saw them exchanging messages in our family group chat, presumably discussing me. Dorothy encouraged me to give them space, to let them process what I'd proposed. On Wednesday morning, as Dorothy and I were enjoying coffee on her patio, a sleek BMW pulled into her driveway. Daniel stepped out, dressed in a tailored suit, briefcase in hand. That's not a good sign, Dorothy muttered. Want me to send him packing? No, I said, straightening in my chair. I need to handle this. Daniel approached with measured steps, his expression carefully neutral. Margaret, good morning. I was hoping we could talk. Of course. I gestured to the empty chair at our table. Would you like some coffee? No, thank you. He sat stiffly, placing his briefcase on the table. I've been reviewing the property documents. You're right about your legal standing as co-owner. His acknowledgement surprised me. I'd expected denial, maybe even threats. That said, he continued, what you're asking is extremely difficult for us financially. We'd have to significantly alter our lifestyle to accommodate such a payment. I understand that, I said. That's why I suggested a payment plan. Daniel nodded, opening his briefcase to withdraw a folder. I've worked up some numbers. If we were to refinance, we could potentially offer you $150,000 now, with the remaining $200,000 paid over 10 years at a fixed interest rate. I blinked, taken aback by his preparedness. You've given this serious thought. It's a serious matter, he replied, sliding the folder toward me. These are the terms we're prepared to offer. I glanced at Dorothy, who gave me an encouraging nod. I'd like my own financial advisor to review this before I agree to anything. Of course. Daniel said smoothly. Take your time. But I should mention, he paused for effect. These terms are contingent on your signing a quitclaim deed, removing your name entirely from the property. I nodded slowly. That seems reasonable, provided the payment agreement is properly documented and legally binding. Daniel's posture relaxed slightly. Good. We're on the same page then. He stood to leave, then hesitated. Margaret, I want you to know, it wasn't personal. When you stayed with us, it was just bad timing. I met his gaze steadily. It felt very personal, Daniel. Being made to feel unwelcome in a home I helped provide? That's about as personal as it gets. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Well, hopefully this arrangement resolves things amicably. After he left, Dorothy and I reviewed the documents he'd provided. The terms were actually quite fair. The interest rate was reasonable, the payment schedule manageable. I'm surprised, Dorothy admitted. I expected him to fight this. He's practical, I said, and he wants this resolved quickly and quietly. I called Caroline that afternoon, asking her to review the proposed agreement. She came over the next day, professional and thorough as she examined each clause. It's solid, she confirmed. The initial payment would be enough for a down payment. On a nice single-level home in Riverside. The monthly payments would supplement your retirement income nicely. Relief washed over me. So, I should accept? Caroline hesitated. Legally, it's a fair offer. But Maggie, are you sure this is what you want? This changes your relationship with your daughter permanently. Our relationship changed the moment they made it clear I wasn't welcome in their home, I said, a lump forming in my throat. This just puts it on paper. Before I could sign anything, I wanted to speak with Jason. Despite his angry departure from our dinner, he deserved to know what was happening. I called him that evening, half expecting him to ignore me. Mom, he answered on the fourth ring, his voice guarded. What's up? I wanted to update you on the situation with Becky's house, I explained Daniel's offer. I'm planning to accept their terms. Silence stretched across the line before Jason finally spoke. You're really going through with this? Yes, I am. Did you ever stop to think about what this will do to our family? To your relationship with your grandchildren? The question hit me like a physical blow. Emily and Tyler, my sweet grandchildren who had barely acknowledged my presence during my stay. Would they become collateral damage in this conflict? I've thought about nothing else, I said quietly. But Jason, what kind of example am I setting if I don't stand up for myself? The example of someone who puts family above money, he retorted. Is that what you think this is about? Money? I felt my patience fraying. This is about respect, about recognition of what I've sacrificed, about not being treated like an inconvenience when I needed help. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Mom. His tone was dismissive, cutting. Just don't expect us to pretend everything's fine at Thanksgiving dinner. After we hung up, I sat in Dorothy's guest room, turning. My phone over and over in my hands. Was I doing the right thing? Or was I, as Jason implied, destroying my family over money? A soft knock at the door interrupted my brooding. Dorothy peeked in, concern etched on her face. Everything okay? You look upset. I explained my conversation with Jason, the doubts now plaguing me. Dorothy sat beside me on the bed. Maggie, answer me honestly. If the situation were reversed, if Becky or Jason needed something you could provide, would you have turned them away after 5 days? Of course not, I said without hesitation. Then stop second-guessing yourself. You're not asking for anything unreasonable. You're not being greedy. You're securing your future, which is exactly what a responsible parent should do. Her words steadied me, reminding me why I'd started down this path. This wasn't about punishing my children, it was about protecting myself. The next morning, I received a text from Becky. Mom, can we talk? Just us? No Daniel? Please? We arranged to meet at Cedar Creek, a scenic spot outside town where we used to have family picnics when the children were young. Dorothy drove me there, promising to return in an hour. Call if you need me sooner, she said, squeezing my hand before driving away. I sat on a bench overlooking the creek, watching sunlight dance across the rippling water. The familiar landscape was soothing. Ancient oak trees, wildflowers dotting the grass, the gentle murmur of flowing water. How many summer afternoons had we spent here, the children splashing in the shallows while I prepared simple picnics on this very bench? Becky's car pulled into the small gravel parking area. She emerged looking tired, her normally perfect hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. As she approached, I noticed the redness around her eyes. She'd been crying. "Mom," she said simply, sitting beside me. "Becky," I acknowledged, unsure how to begin. We sat in silence for several minutes, watching a pair of ducks glide across the water's surface. "Remember when Jason fell in trying to catch tadpoles?" Becky said suddenly. "Dad was so angry about his new sneakers getting ruined." The memory brought a small smile to my face. "Your father was always concerned about appearances. Like someone else I know," Becky murmured. I glanced at her. "Daniel, you mean?" She nodded, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "Did you?" "I know he color codes the family calendar. Red for client meetings, blue for my work events, green for the kids' activities. There's no yellow for Mom needs help after surgery. It doesn't fit his system." The admission hung in the air between us, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement of the problem. "Becky," I said gently, "I'm not trying to punish you or Daniel. I genuinely need to secure my future." "I know," she said, her voice small. "And you're right. It's your money. Your name is on the deed. We've benefited from your generosity for years." She turned to face me, eyes shimmering with tears. "But Mom, this feels so transactional, like we're reducing our relationship to dollars and cents." "That's not what I want," I assured her. "But sometimes clear boundaries are necessary, especially when the unspoken ones have been crossed." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Daniel and I talked for hours after you made your request. He was angry at first, then calculating, trying to figure out how to fight it legally. But eventually, we both realized something." "What's that?" "You gave us a gift we didn't deserve, and we've been taking it for granted. The least we can do is return it when you need it." The simple honesty of her statement took my breath away. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a glimmer of hope that our relationship might survive. "We're going to accept your terms, Mom," Becky continued. "The initial payment, the monthly installments, all of it. But I want you to know it's not just about the legal obligation. It's about doing what's right." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Thank you for understanding." She squeezed back, but her expression remained troubled. "Jason is furious, though. He thinks you're being unfair by not asking him for money, too." I shook my head. "The situation is different. I don't have legal claim to his property." "It's not about legal claims for him. It's about fairness. He feels like you're punishing me while letting him off the hook." The irony wasn't lost on me. "So what does he suggest?" Becky hesitated. "He wants to contribute to buying you a new house, to match what we're paying. He says if this is about your future security, then both of us should help equally." I sat back, stunned by this unexpected development. "He said that?" Becky nodded. "He was up all night researching single-level homes in Riverside. He found one just 3 blocks from the community garden you love so much. 2 bedrooms, accessible bathroom, everything you'd need." Tears sprang to my eyes. Not from grief this time, but from a complicated mixture of surprise, relief, and cautious hope. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let us help you the right way, Becky urged. Not because we're legally obligated, but because we love you. As we sat by the creek, planning my future together instead of in opposition, I felt something shift between us. The hurt wasn't gone. Those wounds would take time to heal completely, but understanding had begun to replace resentment. Dorothy's car appeared in the parking lot, right on schedule. Becky helped me to my feet, supporting my arm as we walked carefully across the uneven ground. "Mom," she said just before we reached the car, "I'm sorry we made you feel unwelcome. It wasn't right." It wasn't a grand apology, but it was sincere. And for now, that was enough. As Dorothy drove me back to her house, I gazed out the window at the familiar streets of Riverside. For the first time since my surgery, I felt like I could see a clear path forward, one where I stood on my own 2 feet, quite literally, as my physical therapy progressed, while also maintaining connections. "With my children? Good talk?" Dorothy asked, glancing at my contemplative expression. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "They've accepted the terms, and Jason wants to contribute equally, even though he's not legally obligated." Dorothy nodded approvingly. "Sounds like they finally remembered how to be decent human beings." "They're still my children," I said, feeling a need to defend them despite everything. "Flawed, sometimes selfish, but still capable of growth." "Just like their mother," Dorothy observed with a knowing smile. Back at Dorothy's house, I found an email from Caroline with listings for single-level homes in Riverside. Among them was the one Jason had found, a charming craftsman-style cottage with a front porch perfect for watching the world go by. The asking price was just within reach with the initial payment from Becky and Daniel, combined with whatever Jason might contribute. As I scrolled through photos of the house, bright, open living spaces, an updated kitchen, a garden already, planted with perennials, I felt a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just a place to live, it was a fresh start. A home that represented not what I had given up, but what I had rightfully reclaimed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is Patricia Henderson from across the street. Strange men have been at your house today, taking photos and measurements. Everything okay?" Patty Henderson, the neighborhood gossip who had never quite forgiven me for being appointed head of the school's curriculum committee over her 15 years ago. Even in retirement, she monitored the neighborhood like a self-appointed security guard. I texted back, "Thanks for letting me know, Patty. I've arranged for a real estate assessment, planning to sell the house since I can't manage the stairs anymore." Her response came quickly. "Selling? Where will you go?" The question made me smile. Patty's concern was less about my welfare and more about satisfying her curiosity. But for once, I was happy to fuel the neighborhood grapevine. "I'm buying a lovely single-level home near Cedar Creek," I wrote. "My children are helping with the purchase. Let her spread that news around the neighborhood. Margaret Reynolds, no longer the woman who gave everything away, but the woman whose children finally stepped up to help her secure her future." That evening, as Dorothy and I sat watching the sunset from her patio, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead would have its challenges, finalizing the agreement with Becky and Daniel, coordinating with Jason, selling my current home, purchasing the new one. But for the first time in decades, I was steering my own life rather than merely reacting to others' needs. "You know," Dorothy mused, sipping her iced tea, "when you first came to stay with me, I was worried you'd let them walk all over you again. I'm proud of you, Maggie." "I'm proud of me too," I admitted. "I just wish it hadn't taken a knee replacement and being kicked out of my daughter's house to find my backbone." Dorothy chuckled. "Better late than never. And speaking of late," she nodded toward the driveway where a familiar pickup truck was pulling in. Looks like you have a visitor. George Martinez, the owner of the garden supply store where I volunteered on weekends before my surgery, emerged from his truck carrying a large potted plant. "Margaret," he called, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. "Dorothy said, you might be up for some company. Brought you a peace lily. They're good for indoor air quality." As George joined us on the patio, setting the beautiful plant beside me, I felt a surge of gratitude for the community I'd built outside my immediate family. Friends who checked on me, who brought flowers, who drove me to appointments without complaint. "George has been asking about you constantly," Dorothy informed me with a meaningful glance. "Nearly drove me crazy with his daily calls." George's cheeks reddened beneath his tan. "Just worried about a valued volunteer, that's all." The warmth in his eyes suggested it might be more than that, but I wasn't ready to explore that possibility just yet. For now, I was focused on reclaiming my independence, on securing my future on my own terms. Still, as the three of us chatted, on the patio, watching fireflies begin to twinkle in Dorothy's garden, I couldn't help but feel that the universe was opening doors I hadn't even thought to look for. New home, new start, new possibilities. All because I'd finally found the courage to stand up for myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Becky. "Daniel's lawyer has drafted the formal agreement. Can we meet tomorrow to go over it?" I typed. Back. "Yes, Dorothy's house at 10 a.m. Bring Jason too." Tomorrow would bring more discussions, more negotiations, perhaps even more conflict. But tonight, surrounded by friends who valued me for who I was rather than what I could give them, I felt ready for whatever came next. The morning sun filtered through Dorothy's kitchen curtains, casting dappled light across the breakfast table where I sat nursing a cup of chamomile tea. My hands trembled slightly as I reviewed the documents Daniel had emailed last night. Formal legal agreements outlining payment terms, transfer of ownership, and release of claims. The language was dense with legal terminology, but the message was clear. In exchange for $350,000 paid over time, I would relinquish all rights to the Oakwood Estates property. "You've read that thing 10 times, Dorothy observed, sliding a plate of toast in front of me. "It's not going to change." "I know," I sighed. "I just want to be prepared. I can't afford to be emotional when they get here." Dorothy settled across from me, her expression serious. "Maggie, being emotional doesn't mean being weak. You're allowed to feel things about this situation." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Dorothy squeezed my shoulder as she passed. "Remember, this is your life you're fighting for. No apologies." I straightened my posture, smoothed my cardigan, and took a deep breath. Game face on. Voices murmured in the entryway, not just Becky and Jason, but Daniel too. I hadn't expected him to come. My stomach tightened as Dorothy ushered them into the kitchen, making a show of offering coffee that everyone politely declined. "I'll be in the garden if you need me," she announced, giving my visitors a look that clearly communicated she'd be keeping an eye on things. An awkward silence fell as we regarded each other across the kitchen table. Becky looked tired, dark circles, shadowing her eyes. Jason fidgeted with his phone, avoiding direct eye contact. Daniel, impeccable in a casual button-down and pressed khakis, was the only one who appeared composed. "Thank you all for coming," I began, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "I've reviewed the agreement, Daniel. It seems in order from my perspective, but I'd like my own attorney to look it over before I sign." Daniel nodded. "Of course. That's standard practice. In the meantime," I continued, "I'd like to discuss how we move forward as a family. This situation has created tension I never intended." Jason snorted softly. "That's putting it mildly." Becky shot him a warning glance. "What Mom means is that we need to figure out how to navigate this change in our relationship." "What relationship?" Jason muttered. "The one where we take until Mom needs something, then suddenly we're too busy." I blinked, surprised by his apparent change in perspective. During our dinner conversation, he'd been defensive, even hostile to my request. Now he seemed to be acknowledging the imbalance I'd felt. Daniel cleared his throat. Let's focus on the practical matters first. Margaret, we're prepared to make the initial payment of $150,000 within 30 days of signing. The remainder will be paid in monthly installments as outlined, with interest. And I've found a house that would work for you, Jason added, sliding his phone across the table to show me photos of the cottage I'd already seen in Caroline's listings. I've spoken with the selling agent. If we move quickly, we can make an offer before it goes to open house this weekend. I scrolled through the photos again, warmth spreading through my chest at the thought of this becoming my home. It's perfect, Jason. Thank you for finding it. I'll contribute to the down payment, he said firmly. To match Becky and Daniel's initial payment. It's only fair. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. That's very generous, Jason, but not necessary from a legal standpoint. This isn't about legal obligations, Jason snapped. It's about doing right by Mom after everything she's done for us. The tension in the room thickened. Becky, eyes fixed on her folded hands, said nothing. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I appreciate your offer, Jason, I said carefully. But I don't want this to create financial strain for you, either. I can afford it, he insisted. Amanda and I have discussed it. We've decided to postpone our kitchen renovation. This is more important. A small, treacherous part of me wanted to ask why my knee surgery hadn't been more important than their kitchen renovation plans a month ago. But I swallowed the bitter question. This wasn't about scoring points. It was about moving forward. There's something else we need to discuss, Becky said suddenly, her voice so quiet I had to lean forward to hear her. The real reason I couldn't have you stay with us after your surgery. Daniel's head snapped toward her. Becky, we agreed. No. She cut him off, an unusual assertion against her husband's wishes. Mom deserves the truth. My heart raced as Becky raised her eyes to meet mine. What confession was coming? Had there been some terrible secret reason for their behavior? Daniel and I have been having problems, she said, each word seemingly dragged from some painful depth. Serious problems. We've been in counseling for months, trying to decide whether to stay together. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My daughter's marriage in crisis, and I'd had no idea. The week you stayed with us, she continued, we had just started a trial separation. Daniel was supposed to be staying at the Riverside Extended Stay Hotel. When you needed a place to recover, he moved back temporarily so you wouldn't know something was wrong. That's why everything was so tense, Jason added. Becky told me not to mention anything to you. I looked between them, struggling to process this new information. Why didn't you tell me? I would have understood. I could have made other arrangements. Becky's eyes filled with tears. You've always been so proud of us, of our success, our stability. I couldn't bear to disappoint you by admitting my marriage was failing. Oh, sweetheart, I breathed, reaching across the table to take her hand. Your value to me has never been tied to Daniel or your marriage. I love you because you're my daughter, not because of what you've achieved. I know that now, she whispered. But for so long I've felt this pressure to be perfect, to justify all the sacrifices you made for us. Admitting failure felt impossible. Daniel, who had been watching this exchange with an unreadable expression, finally spoke. The separation wasn't working. Living together again, even with the added stress of having you there, made us realize we needed to try harder to fix things. So, in a strange way, Becky added with a watery smile, your knee surgery might have saved our marriage. I wasn't sure how to respond to that unexpected silver lining. The revelation explained their behavior, but didn't entirely excuse it. Still, understanding the context shifted something in my heart. I wish you'd felt you could tell me, I said, finally. But I understand why you didn't. Jason, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, cleared his throat. While we're sharing difficult truths, I have one too. My stomach tensed again. What now? Amanda and I have been struggling financially, he admitted. That tech startup I told you about? It's not doing well. We've been living on credit cards for months trying to keep up appearances. Jason, I gasped. Why didn't you say something? He shrugged, embarrassment coloring his features. Same reason as Becky, I guess. Didn't want to disappoint you. When you called about needing a place to stay, I panicked. We can barely make our mortgage payments, let alone handle having someone living with us. The pieces were falling into place now. Both my children struggling with problems they'd hidden from me, both ashamed to admit they couldn't live up to some imagined standard of success. I feel terrible that you've both been carrying these burdens alone, I said. But I need you to understand something important. I never expected perfection from either of you. I just wanted you to be kind, honest people. Well, we've failed at the honest part, Jason said with a hollow laugh. It's never too late to start, I countered gently. An uneasy silence settled over the kitchen as we all absorbed the impact of these revelations. The formal legal documents on the table seemed suddenly cold and impersonal in the face of our family's complicated reality. Daniel was the first to speak. Where does this leave us with the house agreement? Trust Daniel. To bring us back to the practical matters at hand, yet his question was valid. Did these revelations change anything about our financial arrangement? The agreement stands, I said firmly. My need for a stable, accessible home hasn't changed. Your marital struggles and Jason's financial difficulties are separate issues we'll need to address as a family. Becky nodded, wiping away the last of her tears. That's fair. We made a commitment to buy out your share, and we'll honor it. But if Jason is having financial problems, he shouldn't be contributing to your new house, Daniel pointed out. Jason bristled. I can manage my own finances, thank you very much. Clearly not, Daniel shot back. Stop it, both of you. I interrupted, more forcefully than I'd intended. They both turned to me, startled by my sharp tone. This is exactly why we're in this mess. Everyone trying to handle everything alone, keeping secrets, making assumptions about what others can or can't handle. I took a deep breath and continued more calmly. From now on, we talk to each other about everything. No more secrets, no more pretending everything's fine when it's not. The kitchen fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different, contemplative, rather than tense. You're right, Mom, Becky said finally. We've been so focused on appearing successful that we've lost sight of what really matters. Like being there when family needs us, Jason added quietly. Daniel, ever the practical one, brought us back to the immediate issue. So, the agreement stands, but Jason's contribution needs to be reconsidered given his financial situation. I nodded. Jason, I appreciate your desire to contribute equally, but I won't accept money you can't afford to give. Perhaps there are other ways you can help with my transition to the new house. Relief flickered across his face. I could handle the move, packing, hiring movers, setting up utilities, all of it. That would be an enormous help, I agreed. And Becky, maybe you and the kids could help me decorate, make it feel like home. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in weeks. Emily would love that. She's been talking about interior design as a potential career. As we continued to discuss practical arrangements, I felt the atmosphere in the room gradually lightening. The weight of secrets had been lifted, and though we still had significant challenges ahead, we were facing them together now. Daniel excused himself to take a call, stepping outside onto Dorothy's patio. Through the window, I could see him pacing as he spoke, his free hand gesturing emphatically. Is he okay? I asked Becky, nodding toward her husband. She followed, my gaze inside. That's probably the partner committee. The decision about his promotion is happening this week. You never mentioned he was up for partner, I said. It's been his singular focus for months, she explained. Part of our marital problems, actually. He's been working 16-hour days, barely seeing the kids. Understanding dawned. My arrival had been not just an inconvenience but potentially a threat to his career aspirations. If the Goldsteins had indeed been put off by their treatment of me, it could have affected his partnership chances. Daniel returned, his expression carefully neutral. Sorry about that. Where were we? Everything okay? Jason asked, clearly having picked up on the tension. Fine, Daniel replied curtly. Just work. Becky reached for his hand. The partner decision? He nodded once, his jaw tight. And? She prompted. Daniel hesitated, glancing at me almost accusingly before answering. It's been postponed. The committee wants to do another round of client interviews. The implication hung in the air. His treatment of me had potentially cost him this opportunity. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Regret that my situation might have affected his career, but also a sense that perhaps the committee had seen something important about his character. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. I hope it works out for the best. Daniel's mouth twitched, but he only nodded again. We should finalize these arrangements. I need to get back to the office. We returned to discussing logistics. When I would view the cottage in person, how we would structure the payments, what timeline we were working with. Throughout the conversation, I noticed a subtle shift in our family dynamic. Jason and Becky both seemed more attentive to my input, less dismissive of my concerns. Daniel remained somewhat distant, but he was making a visible effort to be cordial. As they prepared to leave, Becky hung back while Jason and Daniel headed to their cars. Mom, she said hesitantly, there's something else you should know. About Emily and Tyler. My grandchildren had been noticeably absent from our discussions. What about them? They've been asking about you, wondering why you left so suddenly. She bit her lip. I may have told them you chose to go to Dorothy's because it was more convenient for you. The implication stung, that I had chosen to leave rather than being effectively pushed out. I see. I know it was wrong, she hurried to add. I was trying to protect them from the tension between us. But they deserve the truth, or at least a version of it they can understand. I considered this. What would you tell them now? That Grandma needed special care after her surgery that we weren't able to provide properly, she suggested, and that we're working together now to find you a new home where you'll be comfortable and safe. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was honest enough without burdening the children with adult conflicts. I think that's appropriate. And Becky? I'd like to see them soon. I've missed them. Her face softened. Of course. Maybe this weekend? We could bring them to see the cottage if you decide to make an offer. As I watched her walk to her car, I felt an unexpected lightness in my chest. The past hour had been emotionally exhausting, filled with difficult revelations and uncomfortable truths, yet somehow we had emerged on the other side with greater understanding, if not perfect resolution. Dorothy emerged from the garden once their cars had disappeared down the street, a knowing look on her face. Well, how did it go? Better than expected, I admitted. Though there were some surprises. She raised an eyebrow. Good surprises or bad surprises? Complicated ones. I gave her the abbreviated version of what I'd learned about Becky's marriage and Jason's finances. Dorothy whistled softly. No wonder they've been acting like jerks. They've been drowning and too proud to ask for help. Sound like anyone you know? I asked Riley. She laughed. Touché. The Reynolds family specialty, apparently. Later, that afternoon, Caroline drove me to see the cottage Jason had found. As we pulled up to the charming Craftsman with its deep front porch and neatly landscaped yard, I felt a flutter of excitement. This could be my fresh start. The interior was even better than the photos had suggested, open and bright, with wide doorways that would accommodate a walker if needed, a modern kitchen with lower counters perfect for someone who might need to sit while cooking, and a primary bedroom with an ensuite bathroom already fitted with accessibility features. The previous owner had MS, the selling agent explained. They modified the house to make it more accessible before they had to move to assisted living. I ran my hand along the smooth countertop, trying to imagine myself preparing meals here, hosting family dinners, building a new life. It's perfect. Caroline, ever the professional, kept her excitement in check as she asked detailed questions about the foundation, the roof, the heating system. But I could tell she was pleased with what she heard. "What do you think?" I asked as we sat on the front porch afterward, considering our next move. "I think you should make an offer immediately," she replied. "Houses like this don't stay on the market long, especially with all these accessibility features already installed." I nodded, a decision crystallizing in my mind. "Let's do it." Caroline helped me prepare a formal offer that afternoon, with the initial payment from Becky and Daniel already promised. I could make a substantial down payment that would keep my monthly mortgage manageable on my teacher's pension. As we submitted the paperwork, I felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. This was really happening. I was buying a new home, starting over at 68. It wasn't how I'd imagined my retirement years unfolding, but there was something exhilarating about taking control of my future this way. That evening, as Dorothy and I shared a simple dinner of soup and sandwiches, my phone rang. It was the selling agent. "Mrs. Reynolds, I have good news. The sellers have accepted your offer. They were particularly moved by your personal letter, explaining your situation." Joy bubbled up inside me. "That's wonderful. What happens next?" She explained the timeline for inspections, financing approval, and closing. "If all goes smoothly, you could be moving in within 30 days. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, the reality of what was happening finally hitting me. In just 1 month, I would have a new home, one where I could live independently despite my knee, one that was mine alone. Dorothy raised her water, glass in a toast. To new beginnings. I clinked my glass against hers. To standing up for myself, finally. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Any word on the house?" "Offer accepted," I replied. "Closing in 30 days if all goes well." His response came immediately. "Yes. Told you it was perfect. When can we start packing up your current place?" Before I could answer, another text arrived. This one from Becky. "Mom, can I bring Emily and Tyler to see you today after school? They miss you." Tears pricked at my eyes as I typed, "Of course. I'd love that." Dorothy found me staring at my phone, a foolish smile on my face. "Good news?" "My grandchildren are coming to visit," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Becky says they miss me." She squeezed my shoulder. "See? Standing up for yourself doesn't mean losing your family. Sometimes it means finding a healthier way to be together." That afternoon, Becky's SUV pulled into Dorothy's driveway. Before she could even turn off the engine, the back doors flew open and Emily and Tyler tumbled out, racing toward the porch where I waited. "Grandma!" Tyler shouted, flinging himself at me with such force that I had to brace myself to avoid toppling over. "Mom says you're getting a new house." Emily, at 16 more reserved than her brother, approached more carefully but hugged me just as tightly. "We've missed you," she whispered against my shoulder. Over their heads, I caught Becky's eye. She was watching us with a mixture of guilt and relief, perhaps seeing for the first time how her decisions had affected not just me but her children as well. "Mom says we can help you decorate your new place," Emily continued, finally releasing me. "I've been watching all these renovation shows. I have so many ideas. I'd love your help, I told her sincerely. After all, I'll want your rooms to be just how you like them when you come to visit. Tyler's eyes widened. We get our own rooms? Well, you'll share one when you visit, I clarified. The house has 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for guests. Still better than sleeping on the couch at Dad's parents' house, he declared with the brutal honesty of a 13-year-old. Grandpa Henderson snores so loud the windows rattle. Becky winced visibly at this casual revelation that her children preferred staying with their paternal grandparents to visiting their maternal grandmother, another consequence of the distance that had grown between us. Let me show you pictures of the new house, I suggested, redirecting the conversation. I pulled out my phone, showing them the photos Caroline had taken during our visit. Emily immediately began pointing out walls that could use different paint colors and suggesting furniture arrangements. Tyler was more interested in the backyard, asking if he could plant a vegetable garden. I don't see why not, I said, touched by their enthusiasm. There's plenty of space. As the children explored Dorothy's garden, comparing it to what they might create at my new place, Becky and I sat on the porch swing watching them. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for everything. For making you feel unwelcome, for not being honest about what was going on in my life, for teaching my children that you were somehow less important than their other grandparents. You don't need to keep apologizing, I assured her. What matters is what we do going forward. She nodded, determination settling across her features. Things will be different, I promise. That evening, after Becky and the children had left with plans to meet again soon, I sat at Dorothy's kitchen table with a notepad, making lists of everything that needed to be done before I could move into the cottage. Sell my current house, pack, sort through decades of accumulated belongings, cancel utilities, forward mail. The list seemed endless. Dorothy peered over my shoulder. That's a lot for someone still recovering from knee surgery. Jason promised to help with most of it, I reminded her, and Becky and the kids will help with decorating. And what about Daniel? She asked pointedly. Where does he fit into all this family togetherness? I sighed. Daniel remained the wild card in our family equation. He had agreed to the financial terms, but his attitude suggested he saw this as a transaction rather than a reconciliation. I don't know, I admitted. He's still processing the impact of all this on his career prospects. The partnership decision, being delayed, hit him hard. Dorothy's expression turned skeptical. Are you making excuses for him now? No, I said thoughtfully. Just trying to understand his perspective. He's built his entire identity around professional success. Having that threatened is disorienting for him. You're very generous, Dorothy observed. After the way he treated you. I shrugged. He's still Emily and Tyler's father. Still Becky's husband, despite their problems. He's family for better. Or worse. Dorothy didn't look convinced, but she didn't push the issue further. Instead, she pointed to an item on my list. What's this about meeting with a financial advisor? I need to figure out how to manage the monthly payments from Becky and Daniel, I explained. Structure them properly for tax purposes. Maybe set up some kind of trust for future medical expenses. Smart, she nodded approvingly. Thinking ahead. That night, as I lay in Dorothy's spare bed staring at the ceiling, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary changes of the past few weeks. From the vulnerability of knee surgery to the hurt of rejection by my children. From the shock of confronting them about the house to the surprising revelations about their lives. It had been an emotional roller coaster I never could have anticipated. Yet here I was, on the verge of a fresh start. A new home designed for my needs. A renewed, if still fragile, connection with my children. A clearer understanding of my own worth and rights. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Reynolds, this is Daniel. I wanted to let you know that I've spoken with my attorney. The paperwork for the payment agreement is being finalized. We should be able to proceed with the initial transfer by the end of the week. The message was purely practical, without warmth or personal connection. But it represented something important, a commitment to honor our agreement, to respect my claim on what was rightfully mine. I texted back simply, "Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate your promptness." As I set the phone down, I realized something profound had shifted within me. The Margaret Reynolds of 6 weeks ago would have been grateful for any crumb of consideration from her son-in-law, would have worried about appearing demanding or difficult. The Margaret Reynolds of today recognized she was entitled to this money, entitled to be treated with respect, entitled to forge her own path forward. It had taken a surgical scar across my knee and the painful revelation of my children's true priorities to teach me this lesson, but I had finally learned it. Standing up for myself didn't mean losing my family. It meant establishing a foundation for a healthier relationship, one built on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. Tomorrow would bring more arrangements to make, more decisions to navigate, more delicate family dynamics to manage. But for tonight, I allowed myself to feel the quiet satisfaction of having found my voice after decades of putting everyone else first. Outside Dorothy's window, an owl hooted softly in the darkness. I closed my eyes, picturing myself sitting on the porch of my new cottage, watching the seasons change, welcoming my grandchildren for visits, building a life that was truly my own. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I fell asleep, with a smile on my face, dreaming not of the past I was leaving behind, but of the future I was claiming for myself. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Each morning, I woke with a mental checklist that seemed to grow rather than shrink despite my best efforts. Between home inspections, mortgage applications, and sorting through decades of accumulated possessions, I barely had time to continue my physical therapy exercises. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Dorothy admonished one evening when she found me surrounded by photo albums in her guest room, sorting pictures to keep from those to digitize. "Your knee won't heal properly if you don't rest." "There's too much to do," I protested, though I couldn't deny the dull ache that had settled into my joint. "Closing is in 3 weeks. That's exactly my point." She plucked the album from my hands and set it aside. "You have help now. Use it." She was right, of course. After our family meeting, both Becky and Jason had stepped up in ways I hadn't expected. Jason had taken charge of preparing my old house for sale, hiring cleaners and handling minor repairs. Becky had arranged for a moving company and begun sourcing furniture for the new cottage that would accommodate my mobility needs. Even Daniel had surprised me. Though he remained somewhat distant during family gatherings, he had followed through on his financial commitments without complaint. The initial payment had been transferred promptly, allowing me to secure the mortgage for my new home. The next day, following Dorothy's advice, I called Jason. "I need help with the photo albums," I admitted. "There are decades of pictures to sort through, and my knee is protesting all the sitting on the floor." "I'll come this weekend," he promised immediately. "Amanda's good at organizing that kind of thing. We could scan the really important ones, create a digital archive." His eagerness to help still caught me off guard. For so long, our relationship had been me giving and him receiving. This reversal would take some getting used to. Saturday. Morning brought both Jason and Amanda to Dorothy's house, armed with a portable scanner and several storage boxes. "Mom, you've kept every school picture I ever took," Jason groaned, holding up a particularly awkward middle school photo complete, with braces and an unfortunate haircut. "Even the retakes." "You're my only son," I defended myself, laughing. "Every version of you is precious to me." Amanda, sorting through another pile, held up a faded Polaroid. "Is this your wedding day, Margaret?" I glanced over, my smile fading slightly. "Yes. With Richard. The photo showed a much younger version of myself in a simple white dress, standing beside a tall, handsome man with a confident smile. We looked happy, two 20-somethings with no idea how quickly that happiness would evaporate. "You were beautiful," Amanda said softly. "Thank you, dear." I took the photo, studying it for a moment before setting it aside. "That one can go in the digitize and discard pile." Jason raised an eyebrow. "You don't want to keep it?" "Some memories serve their purpose by fading," I said simply. "Your father has been out of my life for 30 years. I don't need reminders." We worked through the morning, sorting photos into categories: family vacations, school events, holidays, milestones. By lunchtime, we had made significant progress, reducing 12 bulky albums to 3 boxes of photos to keep and 1 pile to scan. "I had no idea you were such a photographer, Mom," Jason said as we broke for sandwiches. "There must be thousands of pictures here." "I wanted to document everything," I explained. "When you're raising children alone, working full-time, every special moment feels like a victory worth preserving." A shadow crossed Jason's face. "You really did everything by yourself, didn't you?" After Dad left. "I had help sometimes," I said, not wanting to paint myself as a martyr. "Your grandmother babysat occasionally. There were other single moms in the neighborhood who formed an informal childcare co-op." "But the financial burden was all on you," he pressed. "And then when we grew up, we asked for even more." I reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "Jason, helping you and Becky buy your homes wasn't a burden. It was a choice I made willingly. I just didn't anticipate needing help myself so soon. Or that we'd be such jerks about providing it," he added ruefully. Amanda, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Jason told me what happened when you needed to stay with Becky and Daniel. I want you to know our home is always open to you, financial struggles or not." The sincerity in her voice touched me deeply. "Thank you, Amanda. That means a lot." After lunch, we returned to the photo sorting, but the conversation had shifted to memories associated with the pictures. Beach vacations where Jason had been stung by jellyfish, Christmases when Becky had insisted on rearranging all the ornaments on the tree, school plays and sports games and graduation celebrations. "I'd forgotten so many of these moments," Jason admitted, holding a photo of himself at about 10, proudly displaying a science fair ribbon. "You really were there for everything, weren't you?" "Every moment I could be," I confirmed. "Sometimes I had to miss things because of work, but I tried my best." As the afternoon wore on, I found myself growing emotional. These photographs represented a life dedicated to my children. Every decision, every sacrifice, every triumph centered around giving them opportunities I hadn't had. Yet somehow, along the way, I'd failed to teach them the importance of reciprocity, of caring for others as they'd been cared for. Or perhaps I had taught them, and life had simply worn that lesson away. Either way, this process of literally sorting through the past felt symbolic, a necessary step before moving forward. By the time Jason and Amanda left, promising to return, the next day to continue, I was exhausted but satisfied. Bit by bit, I was disentangling myself from the past while preserving what mattered most. Dorothy found me that evening, sitting on her back patio with a cup of tea, staring at the sunset. "Productive day?" she asked, settling into the chair beside me. "Very," I agreed, though more emotional than I expected. "That's natural," she said. "You're not just packing boxes, you're packing up a chapter of your life." I nodded, sipping my tea thoughtfully. I keep wondering if I'm doing the right thing, pushing so hard for what's mine, potentially straining relationships that were already fragile. Dorothy snorted. "What relationships? The one where your daughter couldn't wait to get rid of you after surgery? The one where your son couldn't even find room for you in his loft?" They're still my children, I said gently. And they're trying now. Because you forced them to, she pointed out. By standing up for yourself. By refusing to be a doormat anymore. I couldn't argue with her assessment, even if her bluntness made me wince. I just hope this new arrangement leads to healthier connections, not permanent resentment. That's up to them, Dorothy said firmly. You've done your part. You raised them, educated them, helped them buy homes. Now it's their turn to step up, with or without resentment. The following week brought a flurry of paperwork as the closing date for my new home approached. Caroline helped me navigate the complexities of mortgage applications, property taxes, and insurance requirements. At 68, securing a 30-year signed mortgage raised some eyebrows at the bank, but with my steady pension and the sizable down payment, they eventually approved the loan. You're all set, Caroline announced after our final meeting with the loan officer. Barring any last-minute issues, you'll get your keys next Friday. The reality of what was happening finally sank in. In just over a week, I would be a homeowner. Again, not of the 2-story house I could no longer navigate, but of a cottage designed with people like me in mind. A home where I could age in place, maintain my independence, and build a new life. That afternoon, Becky called to check on my progress. Emily and I want to start planning your housewarming party, she announced without preamble. Nothing too wild, just family and close friends to celebrate your new beginning. That's very thoughtful, I said, touched by her enthusiasm. But let me get moved in first before we start planning parties. Mom, the point is to have the party right after you move in, she explained, a hint of her old impatience creeping into her voice. So people can bring useful gifts for the new place. A warmth spread through my chest at this evidence of my daughter's caring, however imperfectly expressed. In that case, I'd love a housewarming, but please, keep it small. Just family and a few close friends like Dorothy and George. George? Becky's tone turned curious. The garden supply store owner? I didn't realize you two were close. I felt an unexpected flush climbing my cheeks. He's been very supportive during my recovery, bringing plants, checking in regularly. Becky hummed knowingly. Interesting. Don't read anything into it, I warned, though even to my own ears, the protest sounded weak. We're just friends. Of course, Mom, she agreed, not sounding convinced at all. Just friends who will be sitting together at your housewarming party. After we hung up, I found myself smiling at Becky's teasing. It reminded me of lighter times, before adult responsibilities and complicated family dynamics had strained our relationship. Perhaps this fresh start was healing more than just my living situation. 2 days before closing, I received an unexpected call from Daniel. His formal, slightly stiff tone immediately put me on alert. Margaret, I wanted to update you personally. The partnership committee has made its decision. I held my breath, uncertain what outcome to hope for. If he'd been passed over, would he blame me for the Goldsteins' apparent disapproval? If he'd succeeded, would that validation make him more or less amenable to our family's reconciliation efforts? They've offered me the position, he continued, his voice betraying a hint of surprised relief. Effective immediately. Congratulations, Daniel, I said sincerely. That's wonderful news. Thank you. He cleared his throat awkwardly. I, actually have the Goldsteins to thank in part. They specifically mentioned my handling of challenging family dynamics as evidence of my personal integrity. I blinked, stunned by this revelation. They what? Apparently, Daniel continued, sounding slightly bewildered himself, they were impressed by our eventual resolution of the property situation. They told the committee they value attorneys, who can manage their own affairs ethically, even when it's personally difficult. I couldn't help laughing softly. So my insisting on my legal rights actually helped your career? Ironic, isn't it? For the first time since this ordeal began, I heard genuine warmth in Daniel's voice. I owe you an apology, Margaret. I was less than gracious when you needed our help. That's putting it mildly, I observed, but without rancor. Fair enough, he conceded. The truth is, I was terrified of anything disrupting my path to partnership. I convinced myself that your needs were less important than my career goals. He paused. I was wrong. His admission, so straightforward and unqualified, caught me off guard. Thank you for saying that, Daniel. It means a lot. I'd like to make it up to you, he continued. The housewarming party Becky's planning? I'd like to cover the costs, and I want you to know that our home, your former investment, will always be open to you now. After we hung up, I sat quietly, absorbing the significance of what had just occurred. Daniel's newfound respect wasn't just about my asserting my legal claims. It was about demonstrating self-respect that commanded recognition from others. The morning of the closing dawned bright and clear, a perfect Oregon spring day. Dorothy drove me to the title company's office, where Caroline was waiting with a folder of documents for me to sign. Nervous? Caroline asked as I eyed the intimidating stack of papers. A little, I admitted. It's been 20 years since I bought property. Don't worry, she reassured me. I've reviewed everything. It's all standard language. For the next hour, I signed document after document, initialing here, dating there, until my hand cramped and my signature grew increasingly illegible. Finally, the title agent gathered the papers with a smile. Congratulations, Mrs. Reynolds. You're officially a homeowner again. She handed me a set of keys attached to a small ceramic keychain shaped like a cottage. The weight of them in my palm felt significant, symbolic of the independence I'd reclaimed. Outside the office, Dorothy hugged me tightly. I'm so proud of you, Maggie. You did it. We did it, I corrected her. I couldn't have managed any of this without you. That's what friends are for, she said simply. Now let's go see your new home. We drove to the cottage where Caroline met us with a bottle of champagne. First toast in your new place, she declared, producing plastic cups from her purse. As I unlocked the front door, my front door, a sense of rightness washed over me. The cottage was empty, awaiting furniture delivery later that day, but it already felt like home. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, warming the hardwood floors and illuminating the fresh paint we'd chosen. A soft sage green in the living areas, gentle lavender in the main bedroom. To new beginnings, Caroline proposed, raising her cup. And to standing your ground, Dorothy added with a wink. We sipped our champagne, wandering from room to room as I envisioned how the space would look once furnished. The accessible kitchen with its lowered counters for seated cooking. The bathroom with its walk-in shower and strategically placed grab bars. The guest bedroom where Emily and Tyler would stay during visits. When does the furniture arrive? Caroline asked, checking her watch. The delivery window is between 1 and 4, I told her. Jason and Amanda are coming to help set everything up. As if on cue, a moving truck rumbled into the driveway, followed closely by Jason's car. The next several hours passed in organized chaos as movers carried in furniture pieces and Jason directed their placement according to the floor plan we'd designed together. By late afternoon, the cottage had transformed from an empty shell to a cozy, inviting home. The furniture, a mix of familiar pieces from my previous house and new items selected for accessibility, fit perfectly in the space. Amanda had arranged my books on built-in shelves while Dorothy unpacked kitchen essentials. Just one more load from the moving truck, Jason called from the doorway. Your bedroom furniture. As the movers assembled my bed frame, I stood in the living room, overwhelmed by how quickly this place had come together. It wasn't just the physical arrangement of furniture and belongings. It was the energy that had gone into creating this new home. The thought and care from my children, from Dorothy, from Caroline, all of it woven into the very fabric of the fos. Mom? Becky's voice startled me. I turned to find her standing in the doorway, Emily and Tyler peering eagerly around her. Is it okay if we come in? We brought dinner. Of course, I said warmly, opening my arms to my grandchildren as they rushed forward to hug me. This is your grandma's house now. You're always welcome. Emily spun slowly in the living room, taking everything in. It looks amazing, way better than I imagined from the photos. Tyler had already disappeared down the hallway. Grandma, is this our room? He called excitedly. There are 2 beds. Twin beds for when you stay over, I confirmed, following him into the guest room where Jason had set up matching oak bed frames. I thought you'd like having your own space. This is awesome, he declared, testing the mattress with an experimental ounce. Becky set several takeout bags on the kitchen counter. We brought Chinese food to celebrate. I hope that's okay? Perfect, I assured her. I haven't had a chance to stock the refrigerator yet. As Jason and Amanda joined us, we gathered around the new dining table, a round pedestal model that could accommodate my walker when needed. Daniel arrived just as we were serving the food, looking slightly uncomfortable until Becky waved him over to the empty chair beside her. Sorry I'm late, he apologized. The partner announcement went out today and everyone wanted to congratulate me. We're celebrating 2 milestones today then, I said, raising my water glass. A new home and a well-deserved promotion. Daniel? Met my gaze, genuine gratitude in his eyes. Thank you, Margaret. The meal that followed was the first time in years our entire family had gathered without tension or pretense. Emily regaled us with stories from school, Tyler asked detailed questions about planting vegetables in my new garden, and even Daniel contributed occasional anecdotes about bizarre cases he'd handled at the firm. As I looked around the table, at these people who had caused me both deep pain and immeasurable joy, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not an ending, but a restoration, of dignity, of mutual respect, of family bonds tested, but ultimately strengthened. After dinner, as everyone pitched in to clean up, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find George standing on my porch, holding a large ceramic pot of blooming azaleas. Housewarming gift, he explained, his weathered face breaking into a smile. Every new home needs some color. That's very thoughtful, I said, suddenly aware of the family watching curiously from behind me. Would you like to come in? We've just finished dinner, but there's plenty of dessert. George glanced past me at the assembled family, hesitation crossing his features. I don't want to intrude on family time. You're not intruding, I assured him, taking his arm to guide him inside. Everyone, this is George Martinez from the Garden Center. George, this is my family. Introductions were made amid knowing looks exchanged between Becky and Emily. Jason stepped forward to take the heavy plant, placing it prominently in the front window where the afternoon sun would reach it. Perfect spot, George approved. Morning shade, afternoon sun. It'll thrive there. As everyone settled in the living room with coffee and the cookies Becky had brought, I found myself observing the easy way George integrated into the group. He discussed garden planning with Tyler, offered Emily advice on a school project involving plant biology, and even engaged Daniel in a surprisingly detailed conversation about municipal water rights. George used to work for the county water district before opening his garden center, I explained, noticing Daniel's surprised expression. 32 years in water management, George confirmed. Opened the garden center after my wife passed. Needed something to keep my hands busy. The simple statement of loss resonated through the room. Dorothy, who had been quietly arranging books on a shelf, paused to lay a hand on George's shoulder. Catherine was a wonderful woman. She would have loved this cottage. George nodded, a flicker of old grief crossing his face before he smiled, again. She always said gardening was the best therapy. Speaking of which, He turned to me. Once you're fully recovered from that knee surgery, there's a community garden plot with your name on it. The seniors section has raised beds. Easier on the joints. I'd like that, I said, warmed by his thoughtfulness and the way he simply assumed I'd want to continue the activities I loved, modified as needed for my new circumstances. As the evening progressed, guests gradually departed. First Daniel, claiming an early meeting the next day, then Jason and Amanda, who had a long drive back to Portland. Dorothy offered to take Emily and Tyler for ice cream, giving Becky and me a moment alone. "This has worked out better than I dared hope," Becky said, gazing around the cottage with evident satisfaction. "You seem happy here already." "I am," I admitted. "It's strange. I was so afraid of losing my independence, but this place actually gives me more freedom than my old house with all those stairs." Becky settled beside me on the sofa, tentatively taking my hand. "Mom, there's something I've been wanting to ask you, about Dad." I tensed slightly. Richard Bennett was rarely discussed in our family, his abandonment a wound that had scarred. Over decades ago. "What about him? Did you ever regret divorcing him?" Her question was hesitant, weighted with unspoken parallels to her own marital struggles. I considered my answer carefully. No, I never regretted the divorce itself. I regretted the circumstances that made it necessary, his infidelity, his emotional absence. But leaving a marriage that diminished me? I shook my head firmly. Never. Even though it meant raising us alone, financial struggles, working, summers to make ends meet. The hardship wasn't a choice, Becky. It was a consequence. The choice was self-respect, and that I never regretted. She nodded slowly, absorbing this. "Daniel and I are still working through our issues. The counseling is helping, but sometimes I wonder if we're just prolonging the inevitable." "Only you can answer that," I said gently. "But whatever you decide, you won't be alone. You'll always have my support. Even after how terribly we treated you." She looked ashamed, unable to meet my eyes. "Family isn't about keeping score," I told her. "It's about showing up for each other, even after mistakes. Especially after mistakes." She leaned against my shoulder, a gesture so reminiscent of her childhood that my heart constricted. "I love you, Mom. I'm sorry it took nearly losing you to remember how much." "You never nearly lost me," I corrected her. "You just forgot to see me." After Becky left to collect the children from Dorothy, I found myself alone in my new home for the first time. The silence was different from the silence of my old house or Dorothy's guest room. It felt expectant, full of possibility rather than emptiness. I moved from room to room, making small adjustments, straightening a picture frame, rearranging books, testing the new armchair positioned perfectly to catch the evening light for reading. Each item, each decision, represented a choice I had made for myself rather than for others. In the main bedroom, I unpacked the last box of personal items. The framed photo of my parents that had always sat on my nightstand, a small ceramic dish that had belonged to my grandmother, the journal I'd kept sporadically over the years. As I arranged these treasures in their new locations, I realized they looked different here. Not relics of the past, but touchstones connecting that past to my present. The cottage's windows had no curtains yet, allowing me to watch as twilight settled over my new neighborhood. Street lamps flickered on one by one. In the house across the street, a family gathered around a dinner table, their silhouettes visible through uncovered windows. A few doors down, an elderly man walked a small dog along the sidewalk, pausing to chat with a young couple pushing a stroller. Community. That's what this place offered beyond just accessible doorways and single-level living. A chance to build new connections while maintaining the valuable ones I already had. My phone buzzed with a text from Dorothy. "First night in the new place. How does it feel?" "Like coming home," I replied. To myself. She responded with a heart emoji, followed by another message. George seemed quite taken with the place and with its owner. I smiled, not bothering to protest this time. At 68, I was too old for coyness. "He's a good man," I wrote. "It's nice to be appreciated." As I prepared for bed that first night in my new home, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. The journey here had been painful, forcing me to confront both my children's shortcomings and my own role in enabling them. But the outcome, this cozy cottage, the renewed family connections, the reclamation of my financial security, had been worth the struggle. Settling between fresh sheets on my familiar bed, I listened to the night sounds of my new neighborhood, distant traffic, the soft hooting of an owl, wind rustling through the garden plants George had arranged on my porch. Different sounds from my old house, but not unwelcome, just new, like everything else in this chapter of my life. Tomorrow would bring more tasks, unpacking the remaining boxes, hanging curtains, setting up utilities, cooking my first meal in the new kitchen. But for now, in this moment, I allowed myself to simply be present with what I had accomplished. My son-in-law had refused to let me live with them after my surgery. My children had initially balked at helping when I needed them most, but my name had been on their deed, and that legal foresight had given me the leverage to secure not just a new home, but a new understanding within our family. As sleep began to claim me, one clear thought surfaced. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't sacrifice, but self-advocacy. In standing up for myself, I had given my children the opportunity to become better people. Whether they fully grasped that lesson remained to be seen, but the first steps had been taken. In the quiet of my new bedroom, surrounded by familiar possessions in an unfamiliar space, I finally understood what Dorothy had been telling me all along. Requiring respect isn't selfish. Claiming what's rightfully yours isn't greedy. And sometimes, the strongest foundations for loving relationships are built on the bedrock of clear boundaries and mutual consideration rather than endless, unreciprocated giving. With that knowledge settling into my bones, I drifted off to sleep, not as Margaret Reynolds, sacrificial mother and taken for granted grandmother, but as Maggie, a woman who had learned, at long last, to put herself in the equation of her own life. 3 months after moving into my cottage, I sat on my front porch swing, watching the late summer sunset paint the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks. My knee had finally healed enough that I could walk comfortably with just a cane, and the physical therapist had pronounced my recovery remarkable for someone your age. A backhanded compliment I chose to embrace. The garden George had helped me plant was flourishing, tomato vines heavy with ripening fruit, zucchini threatening to overtake their allotted space, marigolds and zinnias adding splashes of color along the walkway. I'd even installed raised beds along the back fence, allowing me to tend my plants without straining my knee. My phone chimed with a text from Emily. "Grandma, can Tyler and I come over tomorrow? Dad has a work thing and Mom has a meeting. We can help with garden stuff." I smiled, typing back an enthusiastic yes. These spontaneous visits had become regular occurrences over the summer, my grandchildren discovering that Grandma's house offered freedoms they didn't have at home. Messy art projects spread across the kitchen table, experimental recipes that sometimes failed spectacularly, gardening lessons that invariably ended with dirt-smudged faces and proud grins. The monthly payments from Becky and Daniel arrived like clockwork, deposited directly into the special account my financial advisor had set up. The arrangement had evolved from a tense legal obligation to simply another aspect of our family's interconnectedness. We rarely discussed it anymore. It had become as routine as Sunday dinners or birthday celebrations. The sound of a truck engine drew my attention to the street. George's familiar pickup slowed in front of my house, and he waved before pulling into my driveway. Over the past months, his visits had become increasingly frequent, evolving from bringing plants or gardening advice to sharing meals and long conversations on this very porch swing. "Evening, Maggie?" he called, climbing out of his truck with a covered dish in his hands. "Thought you might like to try my famous enchiladas." "You're spoiling me," I teased as he climbed the 3 shallow porch steps. "That's the 3rd dinner you've brought this week." He settled beside me on the swing, the dish warm between us. "Maybe I'm just trying to make sure you don't forget what my cooking tastes like before I leave for my fishing trip." "As if I could forget," I replied, bumping his shoulder playfully with mine. "When do you leave again?" "Thursday morning, back Sunday night. Unless—" He hesitated, an uncharacteristic nervousness crossing his weathered features. "Unless you wanted to come along. The cabin has 2 bedrooms," he added hastily. "Completely. Proper arrangement." The invitation hung in the air between us, weighted with unspoken possibilities. At 68 and 70, we were both too old for games, but perhaps not too old for new beginnings. "I'll think about it," I promised, not quite ready to commit, but unwilling to dismiss the idea outright. George nodded, accepting my hesitation. Without pushback, one of the many qualities I'd come to appreciate about him. "No pressure. The invitation stands either way." We carried the enchiladas inside, working together with comfortable familiarity to set the table and prepare a simple salad to accompany the main dish. Through the kitchen window, I caught sight of Dorothy walking by with her small terrier. She spotted us and gave an exaggerated thumbs up that made me roll my eyes even as I laughed. "Dorothy still playing matchmaker?" George asked, noticing my reaction. "Relentlessly," I confirmed. "You'd think she'd have given up by now." He shrugged, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Can't blame her for recognizing a good potential match when she sees one. The casual confidence of his statement warmed me in unexpected ways. After Richard's abandonment and decades of putting my children's needs before my own, the simple experience of being valued by someone who wanted nothing from me except my company was still novel enough to be thrilling. Over dinner, our conversation wandered comfortably. Updates on the community garden, news about my grandchildren's latest achievements, gossip about neighborhood developments. As we cleared the dishes afterward, George's phone rang, his son, calling about a family matter. "Take it," I encouraged. "I'll finish cleaning up." While he stepped onto the porch for privacy, I washed the few dishes and wiped down the counters, marveling at how natural it felt to share my space, my evening, my life with someone again. Not from obligation or necessity, but from choice. When George returned, his expression was troubled. "Everything okay?" I asked. "My daughter-in-law's mother had a stroke," he explained. "They're at the hospital now. Linda's pretty shaken up. She and her mom are close." I dried my hands, immediately understanding. "You should go to them. Family needs to be together at times like this." He nodded, grateful for my understanding. "I'll call you later with updates." After he left, I settled into my favorite reading chair, reflecting on how differently my life had unfolded since that rainy day when Daniel refused to open the door. The journey from rejection to this peaceful new existence hadn't been straight or easy, but each difficult step had led me here, to independence, to healing, to possibilities I hadn't imagined for myself. My phone rang, displaying Jason's number. "Mom," he began without preamble when I answered. "I need some advice." "What's going on?" I asked, hearing the tension in his voice. "Amanda and I had a fight about money, again. I don't know how to fix this. Our business is still struggling, and she thinks we should sell the loft and downsize." "And you disagree?" I prompted gently. "It's our home," he said defensively. "I don't want to give up on it just because things are tight right now." I took a deep breath, considering my response carefully. "Jason, do you remember what you told me when I first brought up selling my house? You said I shouldn't be attached to a property that no longer served my needs." A long silence followed. "That's different," he finally muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" I challenged softly. Sometimes holding on to something, a house, a business, even a relationship, becomes more about pride than practicality. The question isn't whether you can eventually make it work, but whether the struggle is worth the toll it's taking. "When did you get so wise?" he asked, a reluctant smile evident in his voice. "Around the time I decided to stop being a doormat," I replied wryly. "Turns out standing up for yourself clarifies a lot of things." After we hung up, I wandered through my cottage, appreciating anew the perfect fit of this home to my current life. The wide doorways that accommodated my mobility aids during recovery. The kitchen where I could prepare meals without navigating. Stairs. The garden visible from every window, connecting me to the natural rhythms that had always brought me peace. This place represented more than just shelter. It was a physical manifestation of my reclaimed self-worth. Every mortgage payment, funded in part by the monthly contributions from Becky and Daniel, was an acknowledgement that my investment in their lives deserved reciprocation. The next morning brought Emily and Tyler to my door, bubbling with energy and plans for the day. Emily immediately commandeered my kitchen to try a muffin recipe she'd found online, while Tyler headed straight for the garden to check on the vegetables he'd helped plant. "Grandma, the zucchini's huge," he called through the open window. "Can we pick it?" "Absolutely," I authorized, watching Emily measure flour with intense concentration. "There's a basket on the back porch for harvesting." As I supervised muffin making and vegetable gathering, my phone buzzed with a text from Becky. "Thanks for taking the kids today. Meeting canceled. Okay if I join you all for lunch? I've been thinking about your feedback on my resume." "Always." "Welcome," I replied, pleased by this evidence of our evolving relationship. After decades of one-way giving, we were finding balance. Me offering guidance when asked, Becky providing practical support as I established my new life, both of us respecting the other's independence. By noon, we were all gathered around my kitchen table, slightly flour-dusted from Emily's baking adventure, but cozy with family warmth. Becky spread her resume across the table, seeking my input on her job search strategy as she considered leaving her current position for something with better work-life balance. "Daniel's partnership means more money, but also more demands on his time," she explained. "One of us needs flexibility for the kids, and honestly, I'm ready for a change anyway." I studied the document thoughtfully. "Your accomplishments are impressive, but they're buried in corporate jargon. Let's highlight the actual results you've achieved." As we worked together revising her resume, I realized how profoundly our dynamic had shifted. No longer was I the mother desperately trying to maintain connection with reluctant adult children. Now I was a respected advisor, a loving grandmother, a woman with her own full life who chose to make time for family rather than anxiously awaiting whatever scraps of attention they might offer. The afternoon passed pleasantly, culminating in a simple dinner of pasta with fresh vegetables from the garden. As twilight approached, Becky gathered the children for the drive home, both protesting that they weren't ready to leave. "You'll be back this weekend for the neighborhood barbecue," I reminded them. "George is smoking a brisket, and Dorothy's bringing her famous potato salad." "Will Mr. George be staying over again?" Tyler asked innocently, causing Becky to choke slightly on her water. "Tyler!" she scolded, shooting me an apologetic glance. I laughed, refusing to be embarrassed. "Mr. George sometimes stays in the guest room when it gets too late for him to drive home," I explained calmly. "Just like you and Emily stay over sometimes." After they left, I stood on my porch, watching their car disappear down the street. The evening air carried the scent of ripening apples from my neighbor's tree, and the distant sound of children calling to each other as they squeezed the last moments of play from the fading daylight. My phone chimed with a text from George. "Linda's mother stable. Surgery went well. I'm heading home now. Still want to hear your thoughts about that fishing. Trip when you're ready." I smiled, typing back, "Glad to hear the good news. As for the trip, I'm thinking yes." Life's too short not to cast a line into new waters. His response came quickly. You just made my day, Maggie Reynolds. Settling back onto my porch swing, I watched the first stars appear in the deepening blue sky. 6 months ago, I had stood in the rain outside my daughter's house, rejected and uncertain about my future. Today, I sat on my own porch, surrounded by evidence of a life rebuilt on my own terms, a home that met my needs, relationships that respected my worth, possibilities that excited rather than frightened me. My son-in-law had refused to let me live with them after my surgery. But my name had been on their deed, and that simple fact had become the catalyst for reclaiming not just my financial security, but my sense of self. Sometimes, I reflected, the most painful rejections lead us exactly where we need to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.